What is good, guys? It's Rey-Jay back with another video, and in this one I'm going to talk about what's going on with the overall market, break down what's happening to Aapl, Tesla, SPY, and a couple of other tickers, and then break down something very important for tomorrow as we're going to see the market react to PCE. But before I break anything down about all this information, before I get into any more details, let me just mention a couple of things. I am firstly not a financial planner, so take none of this as financial advice. And also, if you guys can, please check out the Moomoo link, which is down below and in the description. If you sign up for Moomoo, the link down below, and deposit $100 into the account, you're guaranteed 5 free stocks plus a $50 cash reward. The offer ends tomorrow, so check it out before they run out. Anyways, now let's talk about the market. How are things looking? So, just as a reminder, we have something very big coming out for tomorrow. 1 hour before the market opens, we have the PCE data report coming out, right? PCE is another very important inflationary measure, and this is going to cause the market to shake. Now, the thing about this data is you have to remember that PCE is somewhat correlated with that of CPI. And CPI ended up being a little bit hotter than what on earth the previous report was the last time it came out. And then core CPI was as expected. So we could see something very similar to PCE data coming out tomorrow, 1 hour before the market opens. This is for Thursday, by the way. And PCE, when it comes out, it's going to cause a very, very big move. So we're expecting a 3.2% PCE report for the month of July year over year. If it's anything higher than that, the market's going to cool off. If it's very close to that, the market may be, it could have a very mixed reaction. If it's lower, the market may like that. So we're going to be watching that very carefully. And then finally, we have core PCE year over year. We want it to be around 4%. Anything higher is going to be bad for the markets. The market's going to cool off. Anything lower is going to help the market at least try to hold up to some extent. So watch this tomorrow morning, 1 hour before the market opens. And then on top of this, we have the Chicago PMI 15 minutes after the market opens. That's going to be important as well. At the same time that PCE comes out, by the way, we also have initial jobless claims an hour before the market opens. That's not going to be as important as PCE, though, so make sure you're ready for all of this data. So we're going to see quite a bit of a reaction. We also have a Fed speaker known as Collins speaking in the morning, right before the market opens. So we have PMI data coming out, PCE data, and the initial jobless claims all coming out. Make sure you're ready for all of these reactions. For earnings coming out, just as a reminder, tomorrow is Thursday. We have Dollar General, not Dollar Tree, Dollar General, a couple of others like UBS, Campbell's, and then Dell coming out after the market closes. This is going to be very interesting. Make sure you guys are ready for this. So how do I see this essentially playing out? I want to break down something important. Aapl is still holding up quite decently. My question is, is it going to fill this gap first and then get a rejection, or is this thing going to reject first before filling the gap? And that's a little tricky to tell. It depends on PCE. It's got to be one of those two most likely. So if you see it coming up to fill this gap, we're going to become very, very, very overbought. If you look at the 4-hour time frame, the RSI is already at 79. The odds do favor this thing pulling back first. Either it kind of comes up to fill the gap, maybe gaps up and then it comes down, or it starts to just gap down as soon as we open. So I'm going to be anticipating some downside for Aapl for that reason. Either we hit 190, then reject and start cooling off a bit, or we just start cooling off as soon as PCE data comes out. That is going to dictate the market and the entire flow of the market, in my opinion. If you look at SPY, we've been making higher highs and higher lows. We're technically still on an uptrend. We're going to see if SPY can break or not. So the thing about SPY is when PCE data comes out in the morning, an hour before the market opens, we could see the market gap down and we could see SPY start to downtrend just a little bit to cool off in a very healthy manner. The reason why that could make sense, and I think that's one of the most probable outcomes, would be because we're very overbought on the RSI. So a very healthy pullback would be expected, and we could see SPY start to come down to the 448 level or even lower than that. However, it's not a guarantee just yet. If Aapl is going to fill the gap to 190 first, we could see SPY go a little bit higher first before we start to come back down to 448 or so. It could go all the way up to 452.8, even the 452s. It could go a little higher first before this thing gets ready to start cooling off, just to cool off the RSI and to get that very healthy pullback. So I want to make that as clear as possible. Either we go a little bit higher and then we start cooling off, or we start cooling off as soon as PCE comes out. It's got to be one of those two most likely. We're going to be watching for a test of 448 again, maybe even 447.5 if that ends up being the case. Now, it's not the end of the world. The market could still try to establish a higher low and try to bounce, but for now, we have to be prepared for something very healthy like this. The triple Q has a potential bullish structure that is still developing on it. If it breaks out thanks to PC, we could see this thing hit 378, maybe go a little bit higher, and then it ends up breaking down to retest like 375 or even 373. That's one possibility. Or it could just like start, gapping down and start dropping depending on PCE. So just to draw it out, sorry I didn't really draw this on SPY. I'm going to try one more time to do that. If PCE is a little hot, we could see this gap down like this and then just start like sinking just a little bit in a very, very healthy manner, nothing too bad, before it tries to come back up over time. This could happen for tomorrow, something like this, where we see like, a bit of a drop before the market tries to like bounce a little bit just to cool off its RSI. Or what could happen is, we kind of push up after PCE data comes out like this to these higher levels, and then we get the rejection. We come back down to fill the gap, and we start cooling off afterwards. And that could help us cool off as time goes on for like the Friday period. So those are the two most likely possibilities. It depends on which way we gap tomorrow. We're going to see what happens with PCE. I wish I could predict that, but that's very hard to predict. It's kind of like CPI. You can't always predict it. For SPY, by the way, let me just redraw this for SPY before I move on to Aapl. We're going to see two likely possibilities. We might gap up tomorrow on the PCE data, retest this high right here, maybe go a little higher, who knows. Then we might reject. It might be like a fake out, and we start coming back down to fill this gap. The market may be getting ready to like start cooling off just a bit in a very healthy manner. There's nothing wrong with this, by the way. This would be completely healthy. If we gap down tomorrow after PCE data comes out, we could be looking for, a bit of a cool off, very healthy retest of 448, maybe 447.5, then a bounce, and the market just kind of like holding up in this area for the time being, just to close in a very, very decent end. So those are the two main possibilities. I do think the odds favor us kind of like gapping down off PCE, but just to be safe, we'll have to wait and see. I think this one's looking more probable. We'll have to wait and see. It depends on Aapl as well. Apple's going to do two things most likely. Number one, I'm going to be looking for Aapl to potentially like gap up a little bit. We might see Aapl like gap up to finish filling its gap all the way up to 190. And then once this is filled, we get like an island reversal, and then we come right back down. Aapl starts cooling off, and it starts bleeding a little bit to cool off its RSI for tomorrow. And we see something like this. Lots of volatility thanks to PCE, but a bit of a cool off, which would be completely healthy. If that's the case, this could help the whole market cool off just a bit in a very healthy manner. The second possibility would be something like this, where we don't actually fill the gap yet. Instead, Aapl just starts cooling off immediately. If PCE causes the market to gap down tomorrow, then we could see something like this on Aapl, where it comes back down to the 184 area before trying to base around there. That could be the second possibility. So we'll see which one it is. Most likely, I see one of these two playing out. I would be surprised if Aapl just pumps and keeps going and going and going. It's very overbought. So it is due to either like pump a little bit more, then start, a healthy pullback, or just start gapping down and pulling back in a very healthy manner. First, one of these two are most likely the possibilities, so make sure you are prepared for this, in my opinion. For Nvidia stock, okay, Nvidia hit resistance at 500. We have some tough resistance, and we're going to be watching this carefully. So for Nvidia, we had this potential rising wedge-like structure, which makes me a little bit cautious going into tomorrow. But here's what I want to mention. Now, we have this accumulation phase that is still technically valid, and there could be more upside still coming for it if it breaks above 500. If it holds above 500, there is potential for it to go higher. But what's the most likely possibility? I don't know if it's going to be a true change or a major change in market structure. It depends on if we break from this wedge or not. So Nvidia has two possibilities. If we have one last pump left, Nvidia could technically try to outperform the market and just keep pumping a little bit more before this thing rejects for Thursday after PCE. Then it starts like dropping. This could happen like a little bit later. It kind of like goes up higher first before it comes back down before getting a bounce. And then another possibility would be, we kind of just like gap down tomorrow with the markets, and we see Nvidia just come back down into the 480s and start sinking back down to 480 for a very healthy pullback. And then it might try to bounce later on, but we could see a retest of 480 first. Those are the two main possibilities. I am anticipating some kind of pullback eventually, either based off the break of this rising wedge. That could happen as soon as we open tomorrow, like we could gap down, or we could maintain the wedge for a little bit longer before the breakdown comes. I'm seeing these as the two most likely possibilities for Nvidia. The odds do favor this red one right here, us kind of like gapping down and starting to retest these lower levels, because we're already very, very overbought, and we hit 500 already. We came very close to 500 and rejected already. So I'm leaning more towards the red possibility, but just to be safe, I think a healthy pullback is something that should come for many different tickers. For Tesla, I think Tesla is going to be dictated by the market as well. We have a very big looking structure. Tesla, it depends on the news, of course. Tesla's also getting very, very tight right now. So you can also draw out this wedge just like this. There's like a little wedge forming right here. And Tesla's getting ready for a very big move depending on PCE. So if PCE comes out and it's like a little bit harder than expected, not so great, we could see Tesla start to cool off a little bit more. We could see it like gap down and come all the way back down here. And may get a retest of like 250 or so. It could even start to cool off just a little bit in a very healthy manner. That would be completely fine if it retests like 247 before trying to bounce. That would be completely fine, guys. Not to the end of the world whatsoever, but it's worth noting that this is a possibility depending on PCE. If we get the gap up tomorrow, Tesla could try to gap up and fight for about this 260 area. If we break it, then 262.5 is where we've gotten lots of rejections in the past. Also 265, if that ends up being the case. Watch for Tesla to potentially cool off as time goes on to fill its gap, maybe intraday, then try to bounce and come right back up like this. So I'm going to be looking for one of these moves. Uh, we would eventually sink though. We wouldn't like hold that high. So we could kind of like sink from here. If we gap up, we could see the market eventually sink down, especially for Tesla. Or if Tesla gaps down, we could see it make an attempt to bounce, but just continue to drop to even lower levels. So I am anticipating some like downside, a bit of a drop still in the markets. I think it is due to do that. We're still quite overbought. A very, very healthy pullback would be expected unless Tesla is about to see some very bullish news. I think this red one right here, this red possibility is the most likely one. So I just want to make that as clear as possible and just be honest. Now, part of why I'm talking about this is because SPY's RSI is at 74 on the 4-hour time frame. It's very overbought. I mean, the last time we saw it at these highs like this, we started to see a very healthy pullback first before it tried to go higher. So the RSI is at these like ridiculously high levels. Makes me a little suspicious, right? Makes me a little suspicious. Could we push with the PCE report? It is possible for us to push a little higher before we get a healthy retracement, in my opinion. But just be open-minded. The RSI in Tesla is also kind of overbought. If you look at the 4-hour time frame, it's very close to overbought's territory. We do technically have this bearish divergence that developed. So could we sink a little bit lower? It's a real possibility. Just be very careful. For Aapl, we have the gap at 190. We could push a little bit higher and get like an island reversal at 190 and just start cooling off just very temporarily before we try to bounce again. Or it could just start dropping from here. The RSI is at almost 80. It's very overbought. So there's a good chance Aapl may start to cool off a bit. And if that's the case, it could drag the whole market with it. So you have to be very careful. Make sure you pay very close attention to Aapl and what it does. That's going to dictate the markets. The QQQ's RSI is at 72. Could we go a little higher, close to like 380 and then reject and bounce? Reject and then start dropping. I mean, yes, that's a possibility. Or we could just gap down and just start dropping immediately. So the drop seems more probable. For Nvidia, we hit this 500 area. We came very close to it. And if anything, we technically have Nvidia forming this very nice looking structure, kind of like a cup and handle. So could we like come down first and then try to form like the handle? That is a real possibility. But for now, Nvidia is it was very close to overbought's territory earlier. It's not as overbought as other stocks. So we're going to be watching, can we get that like rising wedge to continue to play out? So I have the rising wedge here to get the rejection, or is Nvidia going to try to just gap down and end up dropping from here on out? So it's got to be one of those two. Either it stays in this rising wedge for a little longer before we get a bit of a drop, or it just starts to gap down and drop as soon as tomorrow morning, depending on PCE data. For Microsoft, we were talking about some upside and this thing getting very close to this 330 area. We're very close to it for now, but we did form a bearish divergence, which makes me a little bit concerned. Now, I'm seeing two possibilities. We could pump a little bit more to about 333 to fill this gap and then come down. Fill this imbalance and then come down, or we might just start coming down from here. So either it gaps up very close to here, gets this imbalance, and then it starts dropping, or it just starts dropping as soon as we open tomorrow. It's got to be one of those two. I am leaning more in that direction. For Netflix, it came up to our target. We were talking about 437 being retested. Even though it hit this target, let me just mention that Netflix technically formed a bearish divergence. If it doesn't continue going up higher, the rejection could come and this thing does have potential to sink, but we need some confirmation for break below this level right here below 430. If that's the case, then we're going to be watching it retest 425. The odds do favor it cooling off a bit based off this bearish divergence, but just to be safe, let's wait and see what PCE causes. For Nvidia stock, not Nvidia, sorry, the NASDAQ, this thing has been pumping for many days in a row. Uh, it's continuing to look strong, but could we get some kind of change? On the 4-hour time frame, we have a doji candle. On the daily chart, it's still looking pretty strong, but I just wanted to mention that we could get a very healthy retracement to retest this area at 13,800. Then we bounce and continue going from there. We're at resistance on the NASDAQ, so we'll see if that holds or not. We also came very close to resistance on SPX at the 4,500 zone. We have a bullish cross on the PPO. Could we cool off first before we go a little bit higher? Yes, but first we have to be very patient. Now the VIX, I just want to mention the VIX came super close to, if not, it basically filled this gap down here. So if the VIX is filling this gap, could the VIX get a counter trend bounce? That's a real possibility. Get back to like 14.5, then reject. If that's the case, the market could come down a little bit, then try to bounce. The dollar ended up touching 103 today, or 103 flat, trying to bounce off that. Came very close to 103. So if the dollar tries to get some kind of bounce first off this 200 EMA as it's testing support, this could mean that the dollar is going to try to bounce a little bit temporarily because the market may come down very soon before the dollar continues to drop. So there could be a small pullback in the market, very healthy one, temporarily before anything else. As far as Coinbase goes, we got a bullish cross on the daily PPO, which is looking pretty good. But on the 4-hour time frame, we're starting to look like a little weaker. We came up pretty hard. We're going to be watching for a retest of, first off, this support right here around this 82.5 area. And then below that, we have like 78 to 80. So we're going to be watching it to see if it breaks below 82.5. And then if 80 is tested, once again, that could be another signal. Google came up to our target of 137. We're talking about it breaking and retesting this high. Google still looks strong. There's not really much of a sign of weakness so far. We're going to be watching it, how it tests this 137 resistance. Does it continue to break above this, or does it get a rejection? This will depend on PCE. We could see this thing kind of like gap down first and then try to continue with pushing. It looks more strong than the market, so we're going to be watching that for now. For Amazon stock, this is looking pretty decent so far, testing 136 as resistance. If it manages to break there, I'm going to be watching 136.5 to potentially 137. It depends on if we could break or not. As of right now, we're trying to hold up. If we break below 134, you're going to be watching for a retest of 132.7. For now, it's looking like it's in the middle, very, very flat, and it's just indecisive as we're waiting for the catalyst for tomorrow. For Meta, I was hoping this thing would push a little higher to 300. We hit 300 in the pre-market, but then Meta got a rejection. Now it's starting to cool off and hit 295 since then. So for now, could this be like a giant cup and handle that's forming? That's a possibility. If we're still forming the handle, we could see Meta retrace to about this 290 area, then retest 285 before trying to bounce. So anyways, guys, that's what I have for this video. I want to make this as clear as possible. Our retracement is possible, but it doesn't have to be in a straight line, right? We could see the equities push a little bit more before they get some kind of retracement, or they may start retracing as soon as PCE comes out. So watch for these possibilities. My gut does say that this is a little bit more likely, this one right here on SPY, but just to be safe, we have to wait and see which way the market goes after PCE comes out, because PCE could be unpredictable. We can't always predict everything. So we just want to be open-minded and just be ready for the data coming out an hour before the market opens. So once again, 1 hour before open, we have PCE data coming out. We have the initial jobless claims data. And finally, at about 15 minutes after the market opens, we have the PMI report, which is going to cause some more price action. So just get ready, do what you have to do, guys, and I'll most definitely see you guys in the next one. Thank you for listening. Market to the moon as the long term is very bright, and peace out.